Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Andrew. Andy, as most people call me. Yeah, everybody's coming in. Cool. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for all coming to the Cornwall Vegan Festival. It's bigger and brighter and bolder than ever before. Just want to thank everybody for showing up. It's been absolutely awesome. I've probably seen some of you downstairs at the entrance. Hopefully you've had a photo opportunity down there. Get to see what it's like. That's somewhat to scale of what a battery cage would be. So you could imagine hens in there, anywhere from 4 to 6 hens in there. Not much room to move around when you squash that down. It gives you some idea. Anyway, secondly, I'd like to thank you for coming to listen to me speak. It's about my journey to vegan, from meat eating, I eat everything, to animal activist. I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm an active member of Cornwall Vegans, Canadian born and raised. My wife Naomi, I met her in Canada. She's born and raised in Cornwall, so you get 3,000 miles of separation. We started a family in 2003 with our son Jason. 2005 we were blessed with our daughter Riley. My journey begins a long time ago, 1981. I'll let you guys do the math. On a large but non-industrialised farm is where my journey begins. Eastern Canada. I grew up on a farm. I was an ardent carnivore. Ate meat, dairy, fish, everything in between, as you can see. Growing up on a farm, it was a double-edged sword. We had acres and acres, approximately 1,500 acres of land. So that gave me the opportunity to go out, explore outside of the farm buildings, all over the property. You know, we bordered almost 2 towns. We were in a large area, we had a river flowing through the middle of the farm, we had ponds, we had, you name it, everything there. On the other side of the coin is where I stare blankly into space at the horrors that I've seen, the reality of the farming, what it does. My lack of action with that and the disconnect that I had that condoned these activities. On my family farm, we utilised the pastures for the dairy cows and the beef cows. The arable land, we had potatoes, all sorts of produce crops. We had tomatoes, everything, corn. We grew tobacco up to some degree, all sorts. In the barns, we had cattle, dairy cows, we had beef cows. Some of the main buildings, we had turkeys. I get to see them from the time they were born and hatched. Some of them, the cows being born, and I get to see them till the end of life. That was the hardest part, let me tell you. Also in and around the buildings, we had our family dog. We had some cats that roamed around. Both the cows and the turkeys, they were very strong in their communication with me. I didn't really understand it at the time what they were trying to say. I probably didn't want to at the time. Our dog, he was very close to me as well. He followed me everywhere except for school. I think if they'd let him in school, I would have had him there. What appeared to me as the endless area of the farm gave me a lot of time to roam around, enjoy the countryside, process thoughts, as well as connect with nature and the animals that we're surrounded with. Again, this was a mixed blessing. The stronger my desire came to be outside with the animals, surrounded by nature, the stronger the pull was, and it was unreal. I started making that connection, the stronger it became. It was a powerful and undeniable association. The game made stronger by the questioning of the end of life of these animals. Animals who I'd established a relationship with, albeit far too short. I remember always struggling with the thought of the cows and turkeys going to slaughter. I thought dairy cows being removed from their mother in order to harvest the milk. Even more so as my awareness awakened and expanded, I would question my parents. They did their best to instill respect and morals into me, but it was only towards companion animals, your cats, your dogs, that sort of thing, wild animals. That respect and that dignity didn't transfer to the industrialized animals, the farm animals, which are just as important. I tried justifying this as okay, because our farm animals had a huge amount of space, they had freedoms, they had comforts that a lot of farm animals didn't, and that's how I justified it. We named our animals, we spoke to them, we cuddled them, but it still became hard. I believe my dad even struggled with the act of slaughter, so much that we contracted that part of it out towards the end of us trading. I remember as a child, in a lot of trouble. I went up to the turkey pen and I let all the turkeys out to roam freely because I knew in a couple of days' time they were going to slaughter. I had established such a relationship with them that I wanted to let them out. I got a major trouble for that. It was a failed attempt. I was only confronted with statements from my family and my parents about money that would be made because of their bodies for Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's not much of a Thanksgiving to me. Deep in my mind, behind all the traditional reasoning, I knew my dad agreed with me to some degree. Only to find out my dad at age 12 did the same thing. He let the turkeys out of the pen and get in trouble. I continued to struggle with this, not understanding why I did. Everyone I encountered, they would always use excuses like animals are here for us to use. Everyone would say, you know, where would you go to get your protein? We've been consuming meat since the Stone Age. Different excuses, none of them justifiable. That being the fight, I left it at that, and I continued blindly eating meat, dairy, fish, without much of a thought. Our family farm, it was struggling to compete with the large factory farms. Towards the 90s, the level of synthetic stuff was coming out, all the different companies producing all these GMO crops in Canada. It was really pushed in the 90s. My dad didn't want any of that, so the government cut the subsidies, funded the bigger farms that were up for making the dollar. Mainly it was cost prohibitive because of the amount of equipment as well. But the Department of Agriculture, stuff that they were trying to push, Dad didn't want it. In the end, the government made it so hard to compete that we were left with no choice but to sell out in 1999. It was a devastating blow, but that's what had to be done. It was clear to my parents that I didn't want to take over. It was clear to my parents I wasn't interested in the end of life of these animals that I was close to. It was also part of health from my father, because he was, dying slowly with all these chemicals he was exposed to. You see some of these guys going in the feeder tanks with hazmat suits on. It's not for no reason. The nerve agents, there's all sorts of stuff, chemicals in these. And Dad would go in, pretty much bare skin into these tanks. In the end, it took him. It was a devastating blow to the family, even the extended family, because they'd all poured their life and their soul into this. To make matters worse, a week before we sold the farm, my dog died of cancer. He developed a tumour to being exposed to Syngenta and Monsanto chemicals. That was another brick in the wall for me, and that was the end of an era. Sutton Farm was no longer. We moved from there. My parents went and travelled all of North America because they'd never had the time. They'd had to invest all their time in the farm just to make a living. It wasn't long before I'd almost forgotten the battle. I'd lost the plot almost, and I went back and regressed back to eating meat, dairy, not thinking again. Then I met a girl at the local bar. She was Cornish. I didn't have a clue what that was at the time, but I was soon to find out. She was predominantly vegetarian since childhood. It was a shock to me. I didn't understand it, but I was curious. Over the next few years, few months, it opened my consciousness and it expanded. When she gave birth to our son, he was lactose intolerant, as we all are. He was placed on a soy-based formula. cured all of his ailments and fixed things straight away. He allowed us to see that nutrition was available outside of animal exploitation. It was available outside the dairy that was pushed on us. I still didn't get it. I still tried to push meat on the family. I said, oh, you need it, because I'd grown up, systematically encouraged to do it, traditionally encouraged to do it. It was a living to us as a family. I couldn't make that connection. Moving forward, we relocated from Canada to Lincolnshire in northern England in 2008. At that time, my wife and the children, we ate mostly vegetarian at the time. I still found myself hooked on meat, unable to stir the consciousness or the willpower to change my ways. Even though my health was suffering, I could see the health around me suffering, the animals were suffering, but I kept using the age-old excuses I heard as a child. I was hooked on sausages, cheese, like it was crack cocaine. I can sincerely say that I sympathise with drug addicts. It is a strong addiction. The amount of chemicals that are put in, antibiotics that are put into these meats, they're not there for the animal's well-being, they're there to have you hooked, right from the get-go. Every week I'd go get a shop, and the cart would be full of all sorts of body parts disguised as food. I'd have my cheese, I'd have sausages. I never made that connection that cheese, I never made the connection between that and the calf that was pulled off its mother. That was slaughtered for veal. The cow was then used, and systematically used, to extract the milk. The transition, well, that was not pretty at all, but the change in me and my family was immense. The relation to our consciousness, our health, the knowledge that we do not contribute to the needless death and depletion of the ecosystem. The positives in this equation were overwhelmingly strong in substance, that I found there was no longer an argument at all. Anytime I was given an excuse, there was no argument, there was no grounding for it. The negatives were simply based on my guilty feelings. Why didn't I do this sooner? Why has it taken me so long? The withdrawal symptoms of coming off the animal products, then again, that was similar to coming off the drugs. That was the breaking point for me. Me and my family could no longer justify the death of a fellow being based on tradition, because it was humanely raised, because it was grass-fed, because it was free-range, pesticide-free, organic, family-farmed. I know as a fact, none of that means anything when the animal goes to slaughter. There is no correct way to do the wrong thing. The consequence for the animal is just unnecessary. I no longer suffer from the cognitive dissonance, which is when you disconnect between pets and farmed animals. People will always have an outrage when a dog is abused, a cat is abused, a domestic animal is abused. There doesn't seem to be any outrage when you walk through the supermarket and you see aisles upon aisles of animal products. They have the same brain, they have the same capabilities, they have the same thoughts, they have the same family structure. It's undeniable. Little thought would be spared, nor the connection made when you show a picture of a cute lamb in a child's book as you read to your child at night. Then you would go at tea time and serve a side of lamb with it for tea. That connection wasn't made. I finally made that connection because I knew what happened behind closed doors. The lorry full of animals, I knew what happened to that when it reached the slaughterhouse. I couldn't escape the truth, because once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. That connection was that I knew that packaged chickens had desires, feelings. A chicken has the mental capacity of a 3-year-old human child. I knew the pack of bacon was a pig who had social and mental capabilities that would rival a 5-year-old human child. I knew that beef burgers were once a cow, with an intense social structure and problem-solving skills. And I knew that those turkeys on my family farm weren't just randomly conversing with me, they were trying to ask me why. I knew the pink Atlantic salmon suffered the same death as a human that was drowned in a pool. These creatures are all of one world. They all show love, they all show affection. They feel pain, they mourn their loss as well as we do. I found the connection so strong that I could hear the tears flowing and I could feel their emotions within me. The animals became someone and not something, not a product. My awakening to the suffering of these animals and the demise of the ecosystem, it left me with no other option. I needed to realign myself and become active in conserving the ecosystem as well as being a voice against the endless, needless suffering of animals. You'll be hearing a lot of this word vegan. So what does it mean? Well, here's a description. The word veganism denotes a philosophy and a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practical, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, and any other purpose. And by extension, it promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefits of humans, animals, and the environment. And that came from the Vegan Society in 1979. I knew only some of the impact over a year ago. I consumed my last sausage. I didn't realize my vegan journey would be so rewarding, not only for me, but for the animals, for the environment. I found myself, I was continuously learning. The more I awoke, the more I questioned things. And this continuous learning, it isn't just a stance, it isn't just a fashion thing, it's an action. It's not without consequences, it's all sorts. It brings to mind Sir Isaac Newton when he says, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. I know it's an overused quotation, but it really sums up what is said. The more changes I made, the more actions, and with my activism, not only saved countless lives, but it furthered me on my journey of awakening. It unearthed a lot of trauma at the same time. But I wasn't always prepared for that, but it fueled my desire even more to push forward, to push even harder. At that point, I was happy to be a stubborn Canadian, because that's what kept me pushing. I soon realised that it wasn't just a diet, obvious foods that weren't vegan. This was a struggle, but in turn I was rewarded with more knowledge again. The manufacturers of these foods sometimes use divisive ways of leaving stuff out of the ingredients list. This stuff can be, long-term cause nerve damage, neurological damage, heart disease, diabetes, all sorts. So this keeps dropping. Sorry about this, the iPad's having a fit. Then it came time to look at other things other than food. It wasn't just a diet. I looked at clothing, furniture. It took me ages to make that connection. I had leather on my shoes, my settee was leather. The interior of my car was leather. There was animal testing done on the products that I was using. These have great and far-reaching consequences. Then the question came, what do I do with them? Do I just get rid of them because they're not vegan, and then it's almost a wasteful thing? What I believe is if we have that stuff, we don't continue buying it, but we use it to its end of life. And then we replace it with ethical stuff. Then there are other ways in which animals are abused. Animals are exploited in many ways, such as circuses, aquariums, dog fighting and racing, horse racing, rodeos, and the list goes on. We call it entertainment. They consider it torture. On the plus side, there's loads that we can do in our daily lives to help our fellow creatures, cleaning up rubbish that could otherwise poison or entrap animals, disable wildlife. We can do our part to stop unnecessary culls of animals. We can volunteer or donate at a local rehab, or a sanctuary or shelter. We can utilise animal and insect-friendly gardening techniques, like in the autumn, leave some of the leaves in the rubbish for the animals to sleep in and make bedding out of. They suffer the cold as well as we do. With what I've shared with you today, I hope that it's enlightened you. And in the face of the challenges that we face each and every day, I hope maybe that I've armed you with a little bit of knowledge to make the right decision. I'm well aware that it's not a full-blown transition immediately. It doesn't happen like that. It takes time. The more we allow compassion, health, and our shared environment to influence our decisions, the more we have power over this stuff. The more power over the ruthless marketing. They don't have compassion for the animals. They don't have the interest of you or the animal welfare in their interests at all. They're a business, and they're in business for exploitation, and it's impossible to justify that. As you know, I started my journey on a farm. It's 180 degrees from where I am now. If I can do it, anybody can do it. And in my journey, I will continue to learn, continue to push boundaries, and continue to question things. It started with a gut feeling, and then a full-blown communication with the animals. I just didn't listen to what they had to say at that time. Now I do. I could have chosen to make this commitment decades ago. Don't let that happen to you. Once the connection is made, the more awake you become, the truth becomes part of who you are. I would like to extend a massive thank you and taking the time for you guys to come listen to me today and visiting the festival as well. We'll be having a half-an-hour question period at the end of this. If you have any questions about what I've spoken to today, I'd like to thank you all very much.